A burning Roman galley drifts silently across the dark waves. The screams of sailors echo as the sea itself catches fire, thick black smoke curling into the night. The flames burn hotter than oil, spreading unnaturally fast across the water, consuming everything in their path. The narrator's voice cuts through the chaos, asking the question that will drive the entire story: how did Rome, the greatest military power of the ancient world, create a weapon capable of turning the ocean into an inferno and then lose all memory of it? For centuries, historians have celebrated Rome's legions, its disciplined infantry, its roads and aqueducts, and its mastery of engineering. Yet hidden in the shadows of history lies a weapon so strange, so fearsome, that even Roman chroniclers spoke of it in whispers. Ancient fragments describe devices that could throw jets of liquid fire, burning not only ships but the water around them. These references appear scattered in obscure texts, military manuals, Byzantine engineering notes, and eyewitness accounts that were often dismissed as myth. But as archaeology and modern science peel back the layers of Roman technology, a startling possibility emerges. Rome may have possessed an early flamethrower centuries before the famous Greek fire of Byzantium. Imagine the terror of facing such a weapon in an age when most battles were fought with wood, cloth, and pitch. Fire was already the most feared element in warfare. But fire that could be projected, controlled, and sustained, this crossed into the realm of the divine. For soldiers who witnessed it, such power could only come from the gods or from the depths of hell itself. That tension between divine innovation and blasphemous destruction lies at the heart of Rome's forgotten flamethrower. It was not merely a weapon, it was a challenge to nature, a symbol of humankind's attempt to dominate even the elements. The story of this weapon is also the story of Rome's ambition. The empire that tamed continents sought next to master the sea, the one domain it did not fully control. Naval supremacy was not merely a strategic goal, it was the key to empire itself. And as Rome expanded its borders, it faced enemies who fought not only with iron and courage but with ingenuity. Carthage, its great rival, had already experimented with incendiary warfare, launching burning ships and hurling pots of flaming oil. To survive, Rome had to evolve, to innovate, and to outmatch the enemy's fire with something greater, something terrible enough to make even the gods tremble. As we stand at the edge of this mystery, we are left with fragments, bronze nozzles found near ancient docks, strange pressure vessels buried beneath the ruins of forts, and accounts of machines that breathed fire hidden in late Roman texts. Each clue points to the existence of a technology advanced beyond its time. Yet no complete design has survived, no clear record of who built it or how it was used. Was it destroyed to protect its secret? Or did it vanish with the fall of the empire, erased by centuries of war and decay? The deeper we look, the more the flames of history flicker and distort, revealing both brilliance and tragedy. Rome's forgotten flamethrower represents the paradox of power, how the pursuit of dominance can give birth to inventions so destructive that they consume their creators. It is a story of invention and oblivion, of fire and silence, of how an empire that ruled the known world could still lose control of the very force it unleashed. And so, to uncover the truth of this lost weapon, we must return to the beginning, to the moment when Rome first turned its eyes toward the sea, and the race to command fire itself began. When Rome first rose to prominence, it was not a naval power. Its strength lay in the discipline of its legions, the precision of its siege engines, and the iron will of its soldiers. The early republic fought on land, on the plains of Italy, among the hills of Gaul, and across the deserts of Africa. But as Rome's ambitions grew, it found itself facing a rival that ruled where no legion could march: Carthage, the master of the Mediterranean. Carthage's fleets dominated the sea lanes, its mariners veterans of countless voyages, its admirals heirs to centuries of Phoenician seamanship. For Rome to challenge Carthage was to step into an entirely new world, the world of naval warfare. The First Punic War changed everything. Confronted by Carthaginian triremes and quadriremes, Rome faced an uncomfortable truth. It had no navy, no trained sailors, and no experience at sea. Yet in true Roman fashion, the lack of expertise became a challenge to overcome, not a reason to retreat. Within months, shipyards along the Italian coast thundered with activity. According to ancient accounts, Rome captured a Carthaginian warship and used it as a model, replicating its design hundreds of times. They built ships faster than any Mediterranean power before them, assembling fleets not through tradition but through engineering and willpower. What they lacked in seamanship, they compensated with innovation. That innovation was embodied in one device, the corvus, a heavy boarding bridge that allowed Roman soldiers to turn naval engagements into something they understood: infantry battles. The corvus could swing down onto an enemy deck, locking ships together so legionaries could storm across and fight hand to hand. It was an ingenious solution, transforming naval warfare from maneuver and ramming to brutal close combat. But as effective as it was, the corvus also revealed a deeper truth about Rome's mindset. The Romans were never content to fight by their enemies' rules. They sought to reshape every battlefield in their image, to conquer not just opponents but the very nature of war itself. Still, fire remained the sea's most feared weapon. Carthaginian ships carried jars of burning pitch and oil, hurled by catapults or slings. Ancient historians describe night battles where the horizon glowed red, the sea turned into a mirror of flame, and sailors fought surrounded by smoke and heat. These encounters taught Rome a valuable lesson. At sea, the true enemy was not just the opposing fleet, it was fire. To master the waves, they would first have to master the element that could destroy wood, sail, and man alike. Roman engineers began to study the chemistry of fire as seriously as they studied the architecture of walls. They learned how different substances burned, how certain oils clung to water instead of being extinguished by it, and how air pressure could drive liquid through narrow tubes. What began as defensive research would soon cross the line into the realm of weaponry. The shift from simple incendiary pots to deliberate fire weapons happened quietly, driven by Rome's unmatched culture of engineering experimentation. In workshops funded by generals and overseen by the Officinae, the imperial factories of arms, metallurgists and inventors tested mixtures of resin, sulfur, and bitumen. Some early designs aimed to create stronger flaming arrows. Others experimented with pressure-driven siphons capable of projecting oil farther than the human arm could throw. Most of these devices failed or exploded, but every failure left behind knowledge, blueprints, fragments, and improvements. These were the humble ancestors of what would one day become Rome's kairosophon, the handheld flamethrower. The emotional core of this chapter lies in transformation. The Rome that had once feared the open sea was now shaping it with metal and fire. Its soldiers who once stood ankle-deep in mud were now learning to fight surrounded by waves and smoke. This transition was not only military, it was psychological. The empire was evolving from a land-based power into a force that could command all elements: earth, air, and water, and now, perhaps, fire. With each innovation, the Romans stepped further into dangerous territory, blurring the line between courage and hubris. By the end of the Punic Wars, Rome ruled the Mediterranean, its enemies crushed, its fleets unchallenged. Yet beneath the triumph, another kind of arms race was beginning, not between nations, but between human ingenuity and the natural world. The Romans had learned to defeat Carthage's fire, but they had also become fascinated by it. The idea of controlling flame, of weaponizing it not through chance but by design, had taken root in the minds of their engineers. And so, as peace settled across the empire, the forges did not grow cold. In secret workshops and military foundries, new experiments continued, guided by the dream of creating fire that could be unleashed at will, a weapon of absolute dominance. The stage was now set for a terrifying breakthrough. Rome's thirst for mastery over the elements was about to produce something extraordinary, a weapon that could breathe fire. The next chapter in this story would see the empire's greatest engineers turn that dream into reality, and in doing so, step closer to a kind of destruction the ancient world had never seen. In the heart of the Roman Empire, hidden behind the marble facades of temples and the grandeur of forums, a quieter revolution was taking place. A revolution not of politics or philosophy, but of machines. The empire that built aqueducts across mountains and raised amphitheaters from dust was also home to the world's most advanced engineers. They called themselves fabri, craftsmen, artificers, and inventors who turned ideas into instruments of conquest. Among their creations, none would be more mysterious, more feared, or more quickly lost to time than the chirosophon, the Roman flamethrower. The origins of this weapon begin not on the battlefield but in the workshops of scholars and tinkerers. Men like Hero of Alexandria and Vitruvius, writing centuries before and during the height of Rome, explored the mechanics of pressure, airflow, and liquid movement. Their experiments with hydraulics, siphons, and bellows weren't intended for war. They were studies in natural philosophy, the science of how the world worked. Yet from those studies came devices that could force liquid through narrow tubes under pressure, fountains that shot jets of water, automatic doors that opened with heat, and primitive steam engines. To a Roman engineer serving a general, it would not have been hard to see how the same principles might be turned to more violent ends. The chirosophon likely began as a simple concept, a pressurized tube capable of ejecting a stream of flammable liquid. Archaeological evidence and later Byzantine texts describe a small, handheld device constructed of bronze or copper, with a narrow nozzle and an internal chamber that could be filled with a mixture of burning oil, pitch, sulfur, and resin. The operator would pump or compress air using a bellows or piston, building pressure until the mixture could be expelled in a jet. When ignited at the nozzle's tip, perhaps by a lit wick or spark, it would project a tongue of flame several meters long, clinging to anything it touched, even water. To imagine this moment is to witness a blend of genius and horror. Picture a Roman engineer in a smoky workshop beneath a fortress wall, surrounded by amphorae of oil and jars of black powder. Assistants hold their breath as he primes the pump, the metal creaking under strain. A spark, a flash, and then, with a roar like a beast's breath, a ribbon of fire bursts forth, painting the stone walls orange. The engineers recoil, half in awe, half in fear. In that instant, the chirosophon is born, a weapon that breathes like a living thing. But Rome was not a civilization that wielded power without reflection. The empire prided itself on control, discipline, and rationality. A sword obeyed the arm that swung it. A siege engine followed its design. But fire was unpredictable. Once released, it could not be recalled. Ancient writers describe Roman generals debating the use of incendiary weapons, worried not only about their danger to the enemy but about what they represented. Was it honorable to burn an enemy alive from a distance? Could such a weapon be trusted in the chaos of battle? The Romans, heirs to Greek philosophy and Stoic restraint, saw warfare as an art bound by order. The chirosophon threatened to unbind that order entirely. Yet the temptation was too great. Reports suggest the device was tested in controlled conditions, perhaps during naval exercises or sieges. Roman engineers were practical. They measured success not by spectacle but by efficiency. If a weapon could clear a wall or scatter a fleet, it had value. The chirosophon promised both. Imagine it mounted at the prow of a trireme, concealed beneath a tarp, its bronze snout pointing toward the horizon. As an enemy ship approached, oars churning, the tarp was thrown back. A soldier crouched behind the device, lit the ignition, and pressed the bellows. A burst of liquid flame leapt forward, crossing the gap between ships, igniting sailcloth and tarred hulls in seconds. To those who witnessed it, it must have seemed as though the sea itself had turned against them. The underlying chemistry of the chirosophon was sophisticated for its time. Roman engineers had long known the properties of naphtha, a naturally occurring form of petroleum that burned fiercely and floated on water. Combined with sulfur, pine resin, and lime, it created a thick, sticky substance that clung to surfaces and continued burning even when doused. This mixture, when stored under pressure, became a living inferno waiting to be released. It was in many ways the ancestor of the later Byzantine liquid fire, which would terrify entire fleets centuries later. But while the Byzantines would guard the recipe as a state secret, Rome's version existed in a more experimental, fragile stage, a prototype that flickered briefly before vanishing into the smoke of history. The emotional tone of this moment in Rome's story is one of uneasy triumph. The empire had achieved something extraordinary. It had tamed the untamable. For a brief instant, Humans had learned to throw fire like a god, to command the most destructive element known to man. But with that triumph came fear. Those who wielded the Kairosophon understood its dangers too well. The device could explode if overpressurized, or ignite prematurely, consuming its operators as easily as its targets. There were tales, half legend, half warning, of test ranges where entire teams of engineers perished in moments, leaving nothing but charred ruins and the smell of burning oil. This was the paradox of the Roman mind: relentless progress, shadowed by the dread of its own inventions. The same culture that built aqueducts and temples to the heavens also forged tools capable of hellish destruction. The Kairosophon, like so many Roman innovations, walked the fine line between brilliance and madness. And though the weapon's exact form and function have been lost, its spirit endured. Centuries later, Byzantine chroniclers would describe their own liquid fire projectors with words eerily reminiscent of Rome's lost machines, proof that even as the empire's body fell, its fiery genius lived on in the memory of those who inherited its secrets. And so, from the workshops of the empire, a new kind of warfare was born. Rome's mastery of mechanics had given it the power to burn its enemies from afar. Yet this triumph carried a price. The more Rome sought to control the elements, the more it flirted with forces beyond its control. In the next chapter, that fire would leave the confines of experiment and roar to life upon the seas and walls of empires, where its legacy would ignite a new era of terror and legend. The year is 668 CE. The Arab fleets surround Byzantium, the last great Roman city. Its people pray behind towering walls as the enemy closes in from sea and shore. Among the defenders, a handful of imperial engineers prepare something unseen for centuries: bronze siphons capable of breathing flame across the water. When the Arab ships advance, the Byzantines unleash it, a roaring stream of fire that clings to wood and wave alike. Men leap into the sea only to find the water itself burning. Historians later called it Greek fire, but its roots were older, drawn from lost Roman experiments with the Kairosophon, the handheld flamethrower once forged in the empire's workshops. The Byzantines, heirs of Roman knowledge, may have rediscovered the secret through old treatises and fragments. Whether by genius or inheritance, they revived Rome's forgotten terror. The weapon changed the course of the siege. Entire fleets turned to floating pyres, their flames reflected in the night sky like a second sunrise. To allies, it was a miracle; to enemies, an infernal curse. The victory ensured Byzantium's survival for centuries, yet its power demanded silence. After the battle, the weapon's formula and design were locked away, known only to a few sworn to secrecy. The same empire that had unleashed fire upon its foes now feared its own creation. Rome's lost flame had returned for one final blaze, before vanishing again into guarded secrecy and myth. The centuries that followed dimmed the blaze of Rome's fire. Byzantium kept its secret too well. Generations passed, wars were fought, dynasties fell, and with them the engineers who knew how to make liquid flame. What had once been science became legend, a story told by sailors who claimed to have seen water burn. Part of this loss was faith. The Christian empire came to fear its own invention. Fire was divine punishment, the symbol of hell. To wield it against men seemed an act of blasphemy. The Kairosophon, once a marvel of Roman ingenuity, became a forbidden relic, too terrible for mortal hands. The church favored piety over innovation, and the forges grew silent. Practical fears added to the moral weight. The weapon was dangerous even to its masters. A single spark could turn ship and crew to ash. As resources dwindled, emperors abandoned the complexity of pressurized fire for simpler arms. The secret formula, recorded on fragile scrolls, was misplaced, miscopied, or deliberately destroyed. By the time Crusaders reached Constantinople, they found only echoes, rumors of an ancient sea fire no one could recreate. Arab and Western engineers tried to imitate it but failed, producing mere sparks compared to Rome's inferno. In the end, the empire that once commanded flame allowed it to die, not from conquest but from silence. Its knowledge burned out slowly, smothered by faith, fear, and forgetfulness. The fire was gone, but its legend endured, a faint glow in the ruins of empire. Centuries later, historians unearthed fragments that reignited Rome's forgotten secret: bronze nozzles, scorched fittings, and manuscripts describing machines that breathed fire. These clues revealed that the Kairosophon was not myth, but an early ancestor of modern flamethrowers. What Rome had conceived, humanity would rediscover millennia later. When the weapons of the 20th century roared to life in the trenches of Europe, they echoed the ancient design: pressurized fuel, controlled ignition, liquid fire unleashed at will. The same terror returned, proving that progress and destruction are often twins. The Romans had glimpsed this truth, that once man learns to throw fire, he can never truly forget. Yet the Kairosophan's legacy is not only technological but moral. It reminds us that every invention carries a shadow. Fire gives life, forges metal, and protects, but in human hands, it can just as easily consume. Rome's engineers mastered the elements but never the consequences of their mastery. In the ruins of ancient docks, blackened stones and melted bronze still whisper of that moment when man first held fire as a weapon. The story of Rome's flamethrower endures because it mirrors our own age, an age still torn between creation and destruction, wonder and fear. The final image is eternal, a single flame flickering on dark water. It burns not to destroy, but to remind. Rome once mastered fire, but not itself. And in that truth lies the timeless echo of human ambition, the will to create power, even when that power might one day consume us.